Good afternoon. I would like to welcome everyone here today in our viewing audience to the April 11, 2019 meeting of the City of Davenport Zoning Board of Adjustment. Your participation in city government is appreciated and welcome. If you have a pager or cell phone, please turn it off now. Even in silent mode, it may interfere with the room's electronics. My name is Kathleen Hart, Chairman, and the members of our committee present today are, to my immediate right, Jim Reistroffer. That's my left. To my immediate right is Carrie Strayhall, and to my far right is Judith Lee. And if I can go back and fix this, to my immediate left here, Jim Reistroffer is our vice chair. Staff present today is Scott Coops, who is actually Scott Copes, even though it's spelled differently. The Zoning Board of Adjustment is a 5-member judiciary committee. Excuse me. I won't even explain. I can't read very well today. Judicatory board established by state law were appointed by the mayor and confirmed by city council to serve without compensation for a 5-year term. We normally meet twice each month to hear appeals involving hardships from strict application of current zoning laws. We may also grant strict application from current zoning laws. We may grant variances and rule on a variety of discretionary permits. Do we have any corrections from the minutes of our last meeting? If none, we'll take a motion to approve.
I move to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Those are passed. We do have no old business on the agenda. We have one petitioner with today's agenda with two separate requests, if I've got this correct. And please bear with me. I've just had eye surgery. I do know how to read, but I'm having a very difficult time seeing. And is it out of order at all to defer reading this information to somebody else?
Not a problem. You can have the vice chair or anyone else read
Would
it.
appreciate that very much. Jim, would you go ahead and please read that?
The first item of business today is request HV 19-03 of Matt Jacobs on behalf of Swiss Hospitality at 3750 Market Square Circle for a hardship variance to reduce the required parking for the proposed motel or hotel. Proposed plans provide 107 parking space for the 96-room hotel. The property is Zone C2 Corrugated Commercial District. Section 17.10.040, Table 17.10-0 of the Davenport Municipal Code requires 144 parking spaces for a 96-room hotel.
Scott, if you would please present
Okay.
for the city. Oops, I just undid you. Thank you.
So there's two separate reports today, but I do have one presentation. So the site is south of the movie theater here, and it's east of I-74. Utica Ridge Road is over here. Thank you. And then just a little background, there are several other hotels in this area, some of which are 2-story, some are 3-story, and there are more than one 4-story hotels in that area. Everything in this area that you see has been developed with our previous code, and of course now it's zoned according to the new code. So there's a new height standard and a new parking standard, which we found out the parking standards was way more than what we wanted, way more than what is industry standard, and way more than what's happening around in the Midwest. And so we did a study. And so right now before the city council, there's a proposal to change the parking ratio from 1.5 spaces per room for hotels to 1.0 spaces for hotels. And so that's why there's such a huge discrepancy between what the ordinance requires today and what the petitioner is asking for, because that 1.5 ratio is way out of scale with what we've seen anywhere. The other request before us today is for the height of the building. So they would need a hardship variance even with the new code change that we're doing, and that's in the staff report as I mentioned before. So here's the parking lot. The proposed plan shows 107 parking spaces, and if the code goes through with 1.0 spaces per room, they would exceed that because they only have 96 rooms, so they would be above that. But however, that code has not been approved yet by City Council, so it's not what it's not really before us today, so that we're asking for the hardship variance. There's a small chance that they would deny that. I'd say probably less than 1% chance that they would deny that, but it's out there, so we have to act on the existing code as it is today. If you want to compare this to the code that we used to have, the previous code would have only required 32 spaces, and they're providing 107. So that's comparing what we used to have before the new code. This shows us the elevation of the hotel. And I apologize for not having these numbers memorized. I was detained before this meeting and talking to someone, and I didn't have a chance to put these fresh in my mind. So what they're proposing is 48 feet tall and 5 inches, and what's allowed is 45 feet tall right now. And in doing our analysis, well, before I get to the analysis, we sent out notices to the property owners. We didn't receive anything back via mail or email or phone calls, although there are some people here today in attendance. So in doing our analysis, they have met all 4 of the criteria. The hardship has, the strict ordinance, there has been a hardship established there in staff's opinion. The physical surroundings, they do pose a hardship. There is a slope there on this site, and further grading at this point in time is just really late in the process to start regrading the whole thing over again. Unique circumstance, again, that portrays to the slope of the site. So with the hotel, things could be slightly different if they knew that going into grading, but with the parking also, the applicant mentioned in their request that in order to fit the required parking that we would have under the existing code at 1.5, they would have to terrace their parking lot and have to have different grade changes for the lot, which is really not convenient for anybody who's using that parking lot. Secondly, the city, with our new code, we're trying to reduce the impervious surface that we have in town, because that just increased runoff, and with this kind of weather that we have in the spring, it's obvious that excess runoff is not something that we're looking to have. And so we've had 1/3 this amount of parking required with hotels before, never had any complaints with people saying there's not enough room to park at a hotel. So we don't feel that this is going to be an unnecessary burden. So in our analysis, the applicant has met the requirements for all 4 of these conditions for both the height of the hotel and for the parking. Any questions by the board?
Jim?
Scott, a question, and maybe you can answer this. So they're requesting 100 parking places, or 107 they're requesting.
Right. They have 107 on their proposed site plan.
Okay,
And right now at 1.5, that comes out to 144, I believe, is what the report says.
well, I guess that I'm putting some insight in this. With us, I hate to say elderly people like me, I stayed at a motel for 8 weeks. And the problem that was at the hotel, there was plenty of parking places, but at our age group, how many handicap parking places will they have at this new location?
The city of Davenport requires them to meet the ADA standards.
Right. But I'm concerned if they only have 2, that's not enough.
Well, I'm sure that's not what they're providing. They're going to meet ADA standards.
Okay. Can you tell me what that is? If
No,
you-
we don't get involved in the ADA standards at all, so I wouldn't be able to tell you what the ratio is or how they calculate it or anything like that.
Well, I'm just concerned that they're just gonna have 2. And that's, with, which you don't know, Scott, and I understand that, and so maybe I'll ask the applicant when he comes in front of us.
There's obviously way more than 2. There's 2 here, and there's probably 4 or 5 or 6 over there, so they have way more than 2 spaces. Yeah.
Any other questions? Scott, I do have one. Am I understanding that some of the issues that have come up on this have to do with planning during the transition period of the zoning laws?
That's correct. So when this came in, I don't know if they weren't told or they didn't know about it, but it's sort of, we tried to tell people when we got questions 6 months prior to this code coming online, hey, we're getting a new code, things might be different. But even if they take that into account, that new code wasn't published until January 20.
Right.
So there's no way to know exactly what the code was going to be
Right,
at
that's
that
what I
time.
thought
So
I
we
was
try to
hearing.
tell people ahead of time, hey, there's a new code coming, but it doesn't always mean that projects coming down would have had time to go 180 degrees in another direction and fix everything to meet the
Sure.
code.
Sure. Thank you for that clarification. All right. Would the thank you, Scott. There were no other questions. Would the representative of a petitioner please step up to the dais and give us a presentation? If you would, please provide us with your name, address, and then your presentation and your request.
Sure. A physical address of our business, you're saying? or-
That'd be wonderful.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yes. So my name is Matt Jacobs. I'm with Swift Hospitality Group. Our office is in Freeport, Illinois, 1525 South Forest Road in Freeport, Illinois. We're developing and in the future then managing Spring Hill Suites by Marriott is the project we're presenting and talking about today. For the parking, as we've just was outlined in our other projects, most municipalities, the common practice is 1 space per 1 room. There is no food and beverage outlet other than the complimentary breakfast at this facility, so there wouldn't be additional traffic into the hotel for beverages or for food. And there isn't a large meeting space, just a boardroom that would be utilized by internal staff or small meetings that typically are by guests that are staying at the hotel. And as most of us that travel, oftentimes there's if folks fly in, they might be using an Uber or taxi to get to the hotel, or folks carpool. If 2 corporate folks are driving to the hotel, they'll ride together. So we strongly feel that that the 107 parking spots for 96 rooms would be more than adequate for this facility. Do we also want to talk about the height right now then too? Okay.
Sure.
Thank you. So, as was mentioned, on that site, the surrounding area the site of our hotel is at the base of a 25-foot hill. So it's, so that's on, so we're 25 feet lower than if you go towards Buffalo Wild Wings. That's up a hill, and then up towards the Buffalo Wild Wings and Pancheros and so on, up towards Utica Ridge. There's a large slope up that way, and then as the movie theater, this right here is a large slope up. So actually, that 3.5 foot above the 45 foot, the building's still going to be much lower than the surrounding facilities. And then, being a Marriott hotel, Spring Hill Suites, Marriott's the strongest and best hotel company in the world. And the reason they're the strongest and best is their consistency. They have very rigid protocol as far as the submittal process. We have full architectural plans submitted, and throughout the process of the application with Marriott, we had to submit 10% drawings, 30% drawings, 60%, 90%, and you get approved along the way. We're all approved up to 100% at its current form. And to reduce the height of the roof would mean that the plans would have to be redrawn significantly, and the first floor ceiling would have to be lowered. That would significantly delay our ability to get the project moving forward and under construction. Approval processes with Marriott go pretty well when you're using their prototype, because it's already their prototype. Once you go to a custom building, it's a lengthy process through their approval process, and they may even say, no, we need to have that ceiling height because that's the aesthetic of the hotel, and that's what this brand is about. Is we need to have this look and have that consistency throughout all of our Spring Hill Suites across the U.S. and world. Which would if that happened, that would be catastrophic financially at this point. There's been hundreds of thousands of dollars spent on architectural plans, pre-development costs, pre-construction costs, etc. So those are my main points, and if my colleagues from Russell Construction have anything to add, I'll certainly let them, but I appreciate your time today allowing us to plead our case on this variance. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jacobs. Staff have any questions for Mr. Jacobs before he's totally gone from the podium? Any questions at all? Judith?
I just want to say thank you for clarifying about the conference rooms and the restaurant, lack of restaurant. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? All right, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Do we have anybody here in the audience who wanted to speak in favor of this project or this petition? Anybody here to speak in opposition? Yeah, if you would, please step up to the dais and give us your name and address, and give us your comments, please.
Hi, good afternoon, Board of Members. I'm Samir Patel. I'm the my family is the owner of Candlewood Suites, which is actually being built right next to or east of this hotel, proposed hotel.
And your
It is-
address, if we could, before you move.
It is 3800 Market Square Circle.
Okay.
We are still under construction. We are building the same thing. My friend Matt, whatever he said for Marriott goes for IHG, which is also a stronger brand. Candlewood Suites is actually an IHG hotel. We are also utilizing prototype drawings, or we utilize prototype drawings to build the hotel. So I'm here to convey our objection to this requested variances and concerns. First, I'll tell you a little bit about my hotel that might give an idea of why we are trying to object. So on the basis of parking variance, well, we made a significant investment in our hotel in digging out the debris of concrete and other things that we removed before so you can utilize the lot and meet the code. We also had to change our hotel prototype, which we utilize prototype hotel. Our plan was for 83 hotel rooms, and to accommodate parking requirement on the lot we have, which is the lot size is almost 3 acres, but we to accommodate the parking requirement, we actually ended up reducing the room count to 71 rooms. So we did reduce. That's the one solution for meeting the parking space requirement, or fixing the problem, so to speak. Another concern with the parking space they're requesting is to look at the Utica, look at the Market Square Circle itself. The street itself is a two-way street. It's a very narrow street, and it ends at the cul-de-sac that you see in the, I hope I can point that, but if you see the cul-de-sac right there, the hotel is proposed right here. So this is the narrow street I'm talking about, referring to. Our hotel is right here currently. If in case events where the hotel is full, so we're talking about 96 room hotel, 107, and I guess that number probably changed because the letter I have talks about 95 parking spaces, so I'm sure they must have changed that number to 107 now. But whether it's 107 parking spaces or 95, 96 room hotel would also have a staff to operate that hotel. Typically, that size hotel would need about anywhere between 30 to 40 employees. Well, employees will need to park somewhere. They're there. Someone is there, part of the staff, 24/7. So, which means there are fixed amount of cars that get parked there that you do not get accounted towards the guest parking. So, if in the event where the hotel is full, they're still going to need to park somewhere. Well, it's going to overflow on this narrow street that is not designed for such parking. They may very well, the patrons and staff may very well go to the next lot, which is our hotels, and also there are other surrounding hotels. Unless they decide to park somewhere else, again, they would be parking on someone else's property. There is no street parking on Utica Ridge here. So the only choice would be that Market Square Circle, which is a narrow street, narrow two-way street. So, in the event the hotel is full, and a good thing, there's no big conference center or restaurant on the side, which is a good news. But again, if you fill up 96 room hotel, it is still going to cause a very it is going to cause inconvenience to all not surrounding neighbors, but to the hotel guest itself. I guess that would be concerned to you, should be concerned to you guys. So that's our objection for the parking lot variance, and we feel that parking lot ordinance, we reduced our hotel size to meet the parking space requirement. We also, if you come and visit our hotel, the parking grade is not something very convenient to park towards the north end. We still, to meet the code, we had to do the grade. We had to maintain the grade. So we ask that the city code ordinance, parking ordinance, is applied to all businesses equally. So again, solution might be for them is to reduce the number of rooms, just like we did. And there would be a solution for that. But I definitely feel that, or we feel that having inadequate parking is inviting a trouble in that space that we have right now. As for the height restriction variance, again, if this building will overshadow other properties around it from the view of interstate, which is very crucial for the hotel business, which is right here, and we are talking about our hotel being here or some other hotels here, blocking the view of the hotel from interstate. Well, that will provide an undue advantage to a business not in compliance. So therefore, we ask that the city ordinance for the height restrictions be also enforced. So I think that's pretty much all I have.
Thank you for your comments. If you'll hold for any
Sure.
questions. Judith?
Sir, can you tell me about, if you know,
Sure.
the difference in height between your hotel, for example, and the proposed?
I unfortunately I cannot answer that question because I don't have information. But our hotel does sit high enough, but with the increased height of the neighboring hotel, it will obstruct the view from the interstate. So our building is a 3-story hotel. So again, unfortunately, I cannot give you numbers without I don't memorize those numbers.
Of course.
I would love to give you those numbers, but I don't.
Because I think the difference of what they're asking is a little over 3 feet.
I understand.
Yeah, okay,
Yep. It's yes, you're right. You're correct.
okay, thank you.
Yep.
I had one question for you.
Sure.
You are up and running.
Not yet. We are still under construction.
Oh, excuse me.
Yes. But I have a hotel background. I mean, I can answer general questions about the hotel industry or business.
Staff is curious of when, I mean, so was operated, you opened up under the old code, which required approximately 30-some parking spaces for your lot.
Yes, we meet the code, if that's what you're asking.
Yeah, you meet the previous code,
meet-
which
we meet the
required
previous
2/3 less parking.
That is correct. That is correct. Yep. So if
So if you're, the old code requires 30-some parking spaces, how many rooms is your hotel?
71 rooms.
And you're concerned that this hotel, which has how many rooms?
96.
And will be having 100 how many spaces?
107.
We are not required 37.
Well, the old code requires approximately 30 spaces per 100 spaces is what it comes out to, approximately. So, because the old code required 32 spaces for a 95 room hotel. So that's about a third, slightly more. So
think
the new code requires significantly more. It requires 100%.
Which is what I was thinking, that the petition that's before us now, the Marriott would actually have more parking available for staff and visitors than the one that you have under construction.
I apologize, but there might have been some mistake in misunderstanding what you're presenting. I think it.
I don't know how many they're providing per room,
No,
but the code requirements under the old code required a little more than 1/3 of the room number of rooms.
Not for the hotels. I apologize for speaking in the middle, but I don't think that's the case for the hotel.
Well, the previous code requirement for parking spaces for hotels,
Okay.
I did the math on the 95 rooms, and it came out to 32 spaces being required under the old code.
And I apologize. I'm sure he knows code more than me, but as far as I understand, during our planning that did come up, and we probably have more than 100 spaces, parking stalls right now, not 37 that he's talking about. So, no, we had to plan extra parking. We were looking at a couple of other lots in the same area, and due to the not having enough parking space, we had to abandon that plan and go to the lot, which would give us adequate parking space, which is what we are doing. And we spend extra money to make that lot workable by putting large retaining walls on either side of the property. So we had to go through an additional expense to make the lot meet the code and also meet the parking requirement. And so it would be unfair for that, I guess, reason. And if code changes, it changes. I guess that's not the problem. But I'm not opposed to the idea of hotel going there. All I'm suggesting is, again, I'm here to object, guys, but I'm giving a suggestions too, that the reduction of the rooms can happen, just like we did. We went from 83 room prototype to 71 room prototype. Same thing, they could go from 96 to 80 room or whatever that might be. So there is a solution. Practical reason to look at practicality of this point is to reduce the burden on surrounding businesses, including ours. If the hotel is full, 107 parking stalls for 96 rooms are not enough, considering number of guests and the staff. And it will, if that happens, it will overflow on the street, which is not designed to handle this kind of parking. That is the biggest concern.
Carrie?
Okay, so your objection mostly is that some of your parking may be used for some of their employees or some of their guests, correct?
It is possible, yes, sir.
Okay.
That is one of them.
But is that your main concern?
No, that is not my main concern.
Okay, so your main concern is that you had to comply,
Well, let me be clear. Yes, that is one thing, yes.
okay?
But the second is that if not necessarily their staff or customers would park in my parking lot, but they would definitely be parking on a street, which will cause inconvenience to the guests we would have going in and out of the street.
Okay, well, I'm not sure that they're even going to be allowed to park on that street,
Sure.
so,
Okay.
okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Carrie?
I would have a question for the petitioner again, if I could do that.
Yes, the petitioner could come up.
Thank you,
Thank
thank you. And I could have asked the same question, but can you tell me, or do you have an idea of the number of times that you might be at capacity?
Our pro forma has us in a rolling 12 projected at around 70% occupancy for the year. As far as sellout nights, it would be less than 40 or 50 out of a year typically of full sellout. And I'd also like to add, he is pretty accurate on the number of employees. Between full-time and part-time employees, it probably would be 30 to 35 employees for this size of hotel, but it is a limited service hotel. Housekeeping staff is only during the day when most of our travelers are either at their sporting event or at their corporate meetings and so on and off-site. And when the traffic is there is when the folks are at the hotel and sleeping or hanging out or whatever. They're at the hotel, and there would only be front desk staff there in the evenings. So between 1 and 3 employees at this type of hotel throughout the night. There's not additional service staff there.
So 6 to 3 typically is when you'd have most of your employees.
Yeah, housekeeping would actually not start until between 8 and 9 in the morning to give time for guests to leave their rooms or either check out or go to their.
And typically Marriott's check-in and check-out time is 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon, correct?
That's correct. 3 p.m.
Okay, thank you.
Jim?
Yeah, Matt, I got a question.
Oh,
for you.
yes, thank you.
Will you be allowing semi-parking? Semi-parking part of this 106 spots?
There's none designated for semi-parking, and similar to to our neighbors, the parking, if that illustration we had, I think it would be difficult for a semi to come in or out. We would, I would say I haven't come up with the policy, but I'd probably say we won't have semi-parking there.
Okay.
It just isn't the right facility for that. They'd have
Okay.
a difficult time getting out.
Okay.
If I could, we've done 35 hotel projects approximately across the U.S. And this type of hotel that doesn't have meeting space certainly changes the requirements. We've never once had to have more than one space per room, any municipality. And we've never had to actually even have a variance to have that. We've always complied to, typically it's 1-to-1. I don't know that I've ever seen it differently. So, my second point, I don't know the exact elevation, but our neighbor at the Candlewood, their elevation due to the grade in the hill is actually going to be physically higher than the Spring Hill Suites, just due to the hill. So there still would be visibility from Highway 74 to that property, as well as their property runs north-south this way. Our property runs east-west this way. So anyone, driving on the highway should have good visibility and to their facility still. If a person was traveling on I-74 and exited and they come around because they saw our hotel, well, they may just pick his hotel and he might get some business out of it, so he could get a benefit because they have to go right by his to get to the Candlewood Suites to get to the Spring Hill Suites, the proposed Spring Hill. So that could be a benefit as well, especially if the Spring Hill does happen to have high occupancy that night and the Candlewood would still have rooms open, then they might just go to the next door neighbor. So it potentially could be a benefit as well. So, any other questions?
Just one. So is there a slight area behind the hotel that might provide for some of your help to park and not utilize parking spaces?
I'd have to talk to the architect. I'd have to yield to the civil and our civil engineer and our architect to see how that could be achieved. I know there would have to be retaining walls. I mean, it would have to be a complete redesign to make that happen. I will say anecdotally at all the hotel projects we've done and our current managed hotels, we've never had once a time where having one parking spot to one room that there wasn't adequate spots for the staff and the guests, because typically not every room has a vehicle, even at full capacity.
Thank you.
Yes. Okay, thank you. So due to the slope on the north side right here, that side we already do have a retaining wall there, so we've have that expense already in our budget.
Question for staff. Just on timing of these projects, I had asked earlier about this project coming through for approval during a transition period on code changes. Did this other project come through much earlier?
I don't know
Or
the
during the
date,
same
but
time?
so if the building permit, it has to do with when the building permit was submitted. So that there are transition rules for people who have a building permit submitted by a certain date versus someone who meets the other date.
When did construction start on your project? I'm sorry, I should have you up to the podium.
Could I just add one more thing?
He does have a chance for right of last comment, correct?
Oh, myself?
Yeah,
Yes,
the petitioner
yes.
gets chance for
Yes.
right of last comment.
When did construction start on this project?
In 2000, late 2017. So I
Oh,
would say this-
okay.
we actually took, we had to take a lot more time to fix our grid and work on the lot because
Okay.
of the location.
Okay,
We almost took 1,000 truckloads of dirt out of there.
okay.
So yeah, I'm not here to object that part. Code changes. I'm not against it. The practicality of the situation is that if the hotel gets filled up, which it may, or it can, or it will, the new hotel, it will definitely cause inconvenience to the neighbors, and the parking will be overflowed.
Yeah.
That is a fact, matter of the fact, whether you look at whichever you look at. I understand other municipality have a different rules, but there are rules here different for a different reason. Cora will have a different ordinance for signage, for example.
Okay.
And so my
Look,
objection,
But the question here was about just simply when you started the construction. My
Sure.
concern on this was your mention that you played by the rules on this, and that you think that the others should play by the rules, and I take that concern to heart, and the only reason that I would have any that I would give the other party any consideration on that is that they come through at a period where there is uncertainty about how they are supposed to plan this. In 2017, that circumstance didn't exist for you.
Right.
So playing by the rules for them is a difficult thing because the rules are not clear for them. Do you understand the point on that?
I do understand.
Okay, so that's all I was trying to get clear. 2017, the situation was completely different.
Right.
Okay.
And
Okay,
yes, I understand, but the
All right.
code is still the same. It hasn't
I understand
changed.
I understand your other issues. I just wanted
Sure.
some clarification on that.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. All right.
Any other questions from the commissioners? Then we would have final comments from the petitioner.
Just the final comments, when the Candlewood would have started construction, it would have been one parking spot for every 3 rooms, so it is a much different set of rules, and I respect them greatly for following the rules, but it was a much different set of rules. The Homewood Suites that sits right across Market Square Circle Road from the Candlewood Suites exceeds 45 feet. It currently is open and operating, and it was open and operating when the Candlewood Suites would have submit plans for the building and would have broke ground, and as it sits today, and that's up the hill as well. It slopes that way, basically every direction. So that would have a greater impact on visibility to the Candlewood Suites than the proposed Spring Hill Suites. And then my partners from Russell Construction here reminded me too, with the way the site is laid out, and with that retaining wall in the back, the hotel sits very close to that retaining wall. So go back to answer your question, Jim, there wouldn't be a way to go and have employee type of parking behind the facility with the retaining wall already in there. So I don't have any further comments.
All right, thank you very much. I would ask for a motion on this, well, unless somebody had, Carrie has a question or comment.
Just have a question for you or Scott.
Sure.
Since we've talked about, these are separate requests, but since we've talked about all of them, can we make it one motion?
I
Items
believe
1 and
we
2?
need to vote on those as separate issues, but that would go very quickly.
I think it's best to do it separately, because then if one is up and one is down, then
Correct.
Right, I would move to approve request number 1.
I second.
Call the vote, please.
Lee,
Yes.
Strayhall,
Yes?
Reistroffer,
Yes.
Hart.
Yes. And a motion on the second request?
Move to approve request number 2.
Second.
Call the vote, please.
Strayhall,
Yes?
Reistroffer,
Yes.
Lee,
Yes.
and Hart.
Yes, your requests are approved, and with no other business on today's agenda.
We do have discussion unless you want to postpone it for some other time.
Well, once again, I can't read, so
Well,
we do have apparently discussion on today's agenda.
okay, it's the last item of discussion, procedure options for receiving public comments / speaker identification. Staff?
So if the board would recall, it came up after the last meeting that you, well, I think the question was, do they have to present their address? And the response is they don't exactly have to present their address. I believe it may be practice, or it may be in our rules of order, our bylaws, bylaws. So we can certainly change that or change the policy, but it is, we operate in a quasi-judicial manner, so it is very useful that people identify who they are, what their concerns are, where they're from, that sort of thing. So as discussed, there are options. It doesn't have to be exactly their address, but anybody within 200 feet is going to already have their name out there publicly in our packet, just for reference. But it's up to you how you want to proceed with that. So that's just to open it and whatever you guys want to discuss.
Any discussion? Yeah, Jim?
Well, I think since we're involved in the courts at one time or another, legal notices, like subpoenas and other legal documents that have to be served on people that come in front of our board, it's great to have an address. And I'm for having an address anybody speaks here. So I'm in favor of the addresses of individuals that are talking in front of our board.
And one way to compromise would be that they don't have to say it out loud so it's on TV or anything. They could just write it down on a sign-in sheet. So that's another option.
Scott, we are a public record.
Right. If we had that sign-in sheet, it would be public record, but it wouldn't necessarily be on, YouTube and everywhere else, and the people in the room wouldn't be hearing it. They would just be written down on the sign-in sheet.
Carrie?
And so I brought this up, and my reason for doing so was for safety concern. There was something that happened at one of the meetings down here that went viral, and there were a lot of hits on it. And if somebody had an address, that's just my concern. So for me, Davenport, Bettendorf, whatever, is very sufficient from a safety standpoint. If the commission feels that they do need a permanent address, then I'll certainly go along with that. It was mainly just a safety procedural. So.
From my 2 cents on it, I agree that it's a significant safety issue. I mean, in most situations, it doesn't matter much, but we certainly have had some very heated issues come up. And even when it's not a heated issue, there can be situations where there are individuals in the public who discover someone's address that had otherwise been secreted, shielded. I don't think we need to do that. And even if we write them down, somebody up there in a disputed issue can be looking at the address on the list as they write them down. So I'm somewhat uncomfortable with that, and always have been.
And just so everybody's clear, as far as I know from the attorney that we can, the board does have the ability to change it any shape, way, and form they see necessary.
And will we need to go through a process of formally changing the bylaws?
Yeah, I think we should make a motion to say what the manner of identification should be, and then we can amend the bylaws. If they're in there, we'll put them in there again. If not, it'll be a policy situation. So,
would staff be good enough to provide a copy of the section of the bylaws that addresses that at our next meeting?
Yes, we can do so.
Thank you.
Yep.
All right. Any other business for us to take care of?
Motion that we adjourn.
Can anybody just take a look at the agenda for their blind chair and make sure we're really done?
I think we're done.
Good. Motion to adjourn.
Aye. I'm in favor.
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And any opposed? We're adjourned. Thank you all very much.